Today we're going to talk about Irish mythology. Um, Last week I did a video on the country Ireland, and today each country has their own myths and origins. So technically we're going to dive into Irish mythology. So Irish mythology is the body of myths indigenous to the island of Ireland. It was originally passed down orally in the prehistoric era. In the early early medieval era, myths were written down by Christian scribes who revised it considerably in order to fit the history and religion according to Christianized learning. Irish mythology is the best preserved branch of Celtic mythology. Now, that's another thing to pull up to down the line. Come on here for a second. I'll write this down. Since I've heard of Celtic, there we go. So, the myths are conventionally grouped into cycles. The mythological cycle consists of tales and poems about the godlike Tuatha De Danann, who is based and they're based on Ireland's pagan deities and other mythical races like the Fomorians. Important works in the cycle are the Labor Gabala Aran, which is the Book of Invasions, the legendary history of Ireland, and the Children of Blur. And the heroic cycles and even the historical cycle, the cycle of kings, are considered repositories of mythological texts. So the Ulster cycle consists of heroic legends related to the Ulaid, the most important of which is the epic Kettle Raid of Cooley. Now, the Fenian cycle focuses on the exploits of the mythical hero Finn and his warrior band, the Fianna, including the lengthy tales of the elders. The cycles of the kings compromises legends about historical and semi-historical kings of Ireland, such as the madness of King Sweeney and tales about the origins of dynasties and people. And here's a couple pictures to show you here. The top one is Riders of the City, a 1911 painting of the people of the mounds by the artist John Duncan. And then down here, you got Cuchulainn in Battle by Joseph Christian Leyendecker of 1911. Yep. Now, these are also mythical texts that do not fit into any of the cycles, and these include the tales of journeys to the other world. I didn't, but obviously certain schools teach certain things, such as the Voyage of Bran and the Lore of Places. Some written materials have not survived, and many more myths were likely never written down. A lot of stuff has been written out of stuff anyway. Now, Miles Dillon and Nora Chadwick classify Irish gods into four main groups. Group 1 encompasses the other gods of Gaul and Britain. The second group is the main focus of much of the mythology, and it surrounds the native Irish gods with their homes and burial mounds. The third group are the gods that dwell in the sea, and the fourth group includes stories of the other world, and the gods that appear most often are the Dagda and Lo. And I'm not sure if I said those right. Now, the main supernatural beings in Irish mythology are the Tuatha De Danann. Now, Tuatha is construed to mean the folk of the goddess Danan, or people, tribe, nation of the god Ana. Ana or Anu is an attested name of a goddess with genitive from the form Anan, and Danan is only found in later attestations. Reconstructed nominative forms like Danu or Dana are also unattested and are speculative. Um, Now the solution may be that Dana is merely a G added variant of the goddess Anna or Anu. However, others suggest it was a later scholarly invention, an extension added to the original appellation, which was simply Tuath D, meaning God folk, until the simpler version became incommensurably ambiguous with Tuath D used to denote the people of God, Israelites. Now, still, the name Dana, Danu, or Danand is treated as such a variant from the form of Anna or Anu, and thus a bona fide goddess in some scholarly works, like E.g. McAllister's translation of the Labor Gabala. Irish mythology. A Welsh goddess, Dan, is mentioned as possibly connected, insinuating that the plausibility of the Dana or Danu goddess in Irish mythology. Now, prominent male deities include the Dagda, meaning the great god, the long-armed Lu, the silver-armed Nuada, Angus, the sea god, Mananan, Dion, Dion, the healer, and there are also Goabni, the smith, Creedney, the goldsmith, and Lukta, the carpenter. And there is also Agma, a god of eloquence and a warrior, and as well as Net, a god of war. Now, in Irish mythology, the warrior goddesses are often depicted as a triad. The Morgan, the Macha, and Bad. While Keating's history has little to say about these three deities, the warrior goddesses appear in the saga Tayan Bo Kulingi, whatever the fuck, if I said that right. Meddling and the human wars between the Ulstermen and the Connacht, and the Morrigan appears in the guise of a crow, namesake of her sister goddess before Cuchulainn. In a later encounter, she transforms into an eel, a wolf, and a cow. And then there's also Bridget, a goddess of poets, and a daughter of the and she's also a daughter of Dagda. Now, Anna or Anu, also known as Danan, Dana, or Danu, is as aforementioned the mother of the Irish gods, and possibly an alias of the Morrigan. The Tuatha Danann live in the other world, which is described as either a parallel world or a heavenly world beyond the sea or under the earth's surface. Many of them are associated with specific places in the landscape, especially the city mountains, the ancient burial mounds, and passage tombs, which are entrances to other world realms. The Tuatha Dé can hide themselves with magic mist and appear to humans only when they wish to. Now, Tuatha Dé intermarried with their adversaries, the Fomorians, so that when Nuda became disqualified from kingship due to his disability, like a loss of his arm, Bress, who had a Fomorian father, took over the kingship of the Tuatha Dé. Now there ensued the second battle of Mag Tirid, where Lug led the victory by slaying the Fomorian champion Baylor, his own grandfather. And here's a picture of the Fomorians, or what they're supposed to be. The Fomorians is depicted by John Duncan in 1912. Now, the Fomorians, or the Fomori, are a supernatural race who were often portrayed as hostile and monstrous beings. Originally, they were said to come from under the sea or the earth, and later they were portrayed as sea raiders, which was probably influenced by the Vikings, um, by the Viking raids on Ireland at that time. Now, later, still, they were portrayed as giants, and they were enemies of Ireland's first settlers and opponents of the Tuatha Dé Danann. Although some members of the two races have offspring, the Tuatha Dé defeat the Fomorians in the Battle of Mag Turid, and this has been likened to other Indo-European myths of a war between gods, such as the Isser and Vanir in Norse mythology, and the Olympians and Titans in Greek mythology. Now, heroes in Irish mythology can be found in two distinct groups. Now, there is the lawful hero who exists within the boundaries of the community, protecting their people from outsiders, and within the kin group of Tuath, heroes are human and gods are not. The hero, Chucha Lane's fighting skills were fostered by the woman warriors, Scuskath and Afi, who exhibited otherworldly prowess. Likewise, the warrior woman, Leoth Lucra, trained the hero Fionn. Now, the Fianna warrior bands are seen as outsiders, connected with the wilderness, youth, and liminal states. Now, the leader was called Fionn Mac, Cumhale, and the first stories of him are told in the fourth century, and they are considered aristocrats and outsiders who protect the community from other outsiders. Now, though they may winter with a settled community, but they spend the summers living they spend the summers living wild. And trained adolescents and providing a space for war damaged veterans. Now, the time of vagrancy for these youths is designated as a transition in life post puberty, but manhood being identified as owning or inheriting property. They live under the authority of their own leaders, or they may be somewhat anarchic, and may follow other deities or spirits than the settled communities, and the church refused to recognize this group as an institution, and referred to them as sons of death. Now, the Olafis is a sea serpent-like monster in Irish mythology and folklore. Now, the only one I know is the Scottish one, Nessie. That's the Loch Ness monster. Um, Nessie's the only one I know. Now, these monsters are were believed to inhabit many lakes and rivers in Ireland, and there are legends of saints, especially Saint Patrick, and heroes fighting them. Even though even though there was no snakes in Ireland, and that Saint Patrick had nothing to do with driving out snakes of Ireland. In Irish folklore, there is also the Kalish or hag, who has said to, it's rumored that the hag is said to have lived many lives that begin and end with her in stone formation. She is still celebrated at Ballycrovane, Agam Stone, with offerings and the retelling of her life story. And the tales of the I do not. There is some pictures here that I got. Does not show that lady turning into stone. Let's see this here. There is one here. Yeah, so this is the hag, and she's supposed to turn to stone. But the name is Kalish, and this is her on the right hand side. Um, Now this cliff right here is where she's supposed to have been living at. That's about all I got right there. But yep. So basically, the Belly Crowbane Agam Stone with people go there with offerings in the retelling of her life story, and the tales of the Kalish connect her to both land and sea. Several other worldly women are associated with sacred sites where seasonal festivals are held, and they include Maka of Inane, the Carmen and Talithia, among others. Now, Now, the key and the earliest manuscript sources for Irish mythology are the late 11th and 12th century book of the Duncrow, the book of Leinster in early 12th century, and M.S. Rawlinson B. 502 Roll, which is the composite of the mid 12th century and the 14th and 15th century redactions. Now, despite the dates of these sources, most of the material they maintain predates their composition. Now, the Yellow Book of Lacan, which is YBL, is another important codex that contains earlier pieces of writing, even though it was compiled at a much later period, between the years of 1391 and 1582. The YBL includes the legends of the Fionn Mac Cumhale and fragmentary portions of the Cattle Raid of Cooley, of the same version as the oldest but incomplete copy in LU. Now other important sources compiled around the late 14th century or the early 15th century of the book of Ballymote, or known as BB, and you also have the book of High Many, a fuller text concerning the four treasures of the Tuatha De Danann is found in the YBL and the BB, though a briefer account is also found in the Labor Gabala. Now, the other 15th century manuscript, the Book of Fermoy, contains, for instance, the Ultim Tiga de Meter. Now, in the modern period, Geoffrey Keating's Foraz Visa, the history of Ireland, dates back to 1640. Now, most of these manuscripts were created by Christian monks who may have well been torn between a desire to record their narrative culture and hostility to pagan beliefs, resulting in some of the gods being um, um, memorized. Many of the later sources may also have been formed parts of a propaganda effort designed to create a history for the people of Ireland that could bear comparison with the mythological descent of their British invaders from the founders of Rome, as promulgated by Geoffrey of Monmouth and others. There has also a tendency to rework Irish genealogies to fit them into the schematics of Greek or biblical genealogy. Now, whether medieval Irish literature provides reliable evidence of oral tradition remains a matter of debate. Kenneth Jackson described the Ulster cycle as a window on the Iron Age, and Garrett Olmsted has attempted to draw parallels between Tain Bu Culling and the Ulster cycle epic and the iconography of the Gunstrup Cauldron. Now, however, these database claims have been challenged by revisionists, scholars who believe that much of the literature was created rather than merely recorded in Christian times, more or less in imitation of the epics of classical literature that came with Latin meaning. Now, the mythological cycle, compromising stories of the former gods and origins of the Irish, is the least well preserved of the four cycles, but it's about the principal people who invaded and inhabited the island. The people include Cessir and her followers, the Formians, the Partholinians, the Nemedians, the Firbolgs, and the Tuatha Danann, and the Milesians. The most important sources are the metrical Then Shenkens are the lore places in the Lamor Gabala, or Book of Invasions. Um, Now, other manuscripts preserve such mythological tales as the Dream of Angus, the Wooing of Etain, and Cath Maige Tiree, the Second Battle of Mag Tiree, one of the best known of all our stories. Oidhead Clain Lur, or the tragedy of the children of Lur, is also part of that cycle. Now, the Borgabella Iran is a pseudo history of Ireland, tracing the ancestry of the Irish back to before Noah, who built the Ark. It tells of a series of invasions or takings of Ireland by a succession of people, and the fifth of whom was the people known as the Tuath Danann, people of the goddess Danu, and they were believed to have inhabited the island before they rivaled the Gaels, or the Malaysians, and they faced opposition from their enemies, the Formians, led by Baylor of the Evil Eye. And Baylor was eventually slain by Lampada, Lou of the Long Arm, at the Second Battle of Mag Tareed. And when the rival of with the rival of the Gauls, um, the Tuatha De Danann retired underground to become the fairy people of a later myth and legend. Now, the metrical Din Shekans is the great onomastics work of early Ireland, given the naming of the legends of a significant place in a sequence of poems. It induces a lot of important information on mythological cycle figures and stories, including the Battle of Talitha, in which the Tuatha De Danann were defeated by the Malaysians. Now, by the Middle Ages, the Tuatha De Danann were not viewed so much as gods as the shape-shifting magician population of an earlier golden age of Ireland. Key texts such as Labor Gabala Iran and Cath Mage Tareed present themselves as kings and heroes of a distant past and complete with death tales. However, there is considerable evidence, both in the text and from the wider Celtic world, that they were once both considered deities. Okay, so hold on here. Now, the Ulster cycle was traditionally set around the first century AD, and most of the action takes place in the provinces of Ulster and Connaught. Now, it consists of a group of heroic tales dealing with the lives of Canaber, Macnessa, king of Ulster, the great hero Cú Chulainn, who was the son of Lug, and one of their friends, lovers, and enemies, and these are the Ulaid, or people of the northeastern corner of Ireland, and the action of the stories center around the royal court of Emain Macha, known in English as Navan Fort. Now, close to the modern town of Armagh, the Ulaid had close links with the Irish colony in Scotland, and part of Cú Chulainn's training takes place in the colony. Now, the cycle consists of stories of the births, early lives, and training, wooing, battles, feastings, and deaths of the heroes. Um, it reflects a warrior society in which warfare consists mainly of single combats, and wealth is measured mainly in cattle. These stories also are written mainly in prose, and the centerpiece of the Ulster cycle is the Tain Bo Kulang. Other important Ulster cycles include the tragic death of Apy's only son, Okay, so these stories are written mainly in prose, and the centerpiece of the Ulster cycle is the Tang Bo Kalang, and other important Ulster cycles include the tragic death of AP's only son, Bracru's feast, and the destruction of Durgo's hostel. Now, the exile of the sons of Usnek, better known as the tragedy of Deidre, became the source material for plays by William Butler Yeats, Deidre, 1907, and John Millington Synge, Deidre of the Sorrows of 1910. And you got more pictures here. That is Cuchulainn in battle. And then you got this right here, where some stone tablet writing. Yeah. And you got this picture down here. So yeah. I can't really tell what it is. Let's go back up. In this picture, you got the Fomorians, which are riding on a horse. And then down here, it's this is a stone tablet writing. I cannot read what it says, but it says medieval manuscripts are the main source for Irish mythology and early literature. It's hard to read that because, and looking at this, it's in Gaelic, and I cannot read that. Now, when it comes to Irish mythology, um, now when it comes to okay, so when it comes to this cycle is in some respects close to the mythological cycle, and some of the characters from the latter reappear, and in the same sort of shape-shifting magic is much in evidence, side by side with the grim and almost callous realism. And while we suspect a few characters such as Medb or Curoi of both being deities, and Cuchulainn in particular displays superhuman prowess, the characters are mortal and associated with a specific time and a place, and if the mythological cycle represents a golden age, this would indicate the Ulster cycle is Ireland's heroic age. And here is Cuchulainn in battle. Um, I cannot really tell. He could be on a horse or just a chariot. Yeah, it looks like a horse. Yeah, it looks like a horse. You can see the hooves right here. So it looks like he's riding a horse and and it's attached to a chariot. But you can't really see the horse's face. Now the Ulster cycle is traditionally set around the first century AD, and most of the action takes place in the provinces of Ulster and Connaught. And like I said, it consists of a group of heroic tales dealing with the lives of Canocabar Mac Nessa and Lug, and of their friends, lovers, and enemies. And these are the Ulaid. Um, so we have those people. Now, when it comes like the Ulster cycle, the Fianna cycle or Fenian cycle, also referred to as the Ossianic cycle, is concerned with the deeds of Irish heroes. The stories of the cycle appear to be set around the 3rd century and mainly in the provinces of Leinster and Munster. Um, Differently, the Fianna cycle has strong links to the Gaelic-speaking community in Scotland, with many extant texts from that country. They also differ from the Ulster cycle in that the stories are told mainly in verse, and that in tone they are nearer to the tradition of romance than the tradition of epic. The stories concern the doings of Fionn Mac Cumhaill and his band of soldiers, the Fianna. Um, Now, the single largest medieval Irish text for the Fianna cycle is the the Colloquy of the Old Men, which is found in two 15th century manuscripts, the Book of Lismore and Loud, back in 1610 and the year 610, as well as a 17th century manuscript from Kilkenny, County Dublin. Now, the text is dated from a linguistic evidence to the 12th century. The text records conversations between um, the Cato Mac Ronayne and Uisin, the last surviving members of the Fianna and St. Patrick, and consists of about 8,000 lines. And the late dates of the manuscripts may reflect a longer oral tradition for the Fenian stories. Now, the Fianna of the story are divided into the clan Beskni, led by Fionn Mac Cumhaill, who's often described as Finn Mac Cool or Finn's son of Cumhaill, and the clan Morna, led by his enemy Gold Mac Mora. Morna, sorry. Now Gol killed Fionn's father Cumhaill in battle, and the boy Fionn was brought up in secrecy. Now, as a youth, while being trained in the art of poetry, um, he would accidentally burn his thumb while cooking the salmon of knowledge, which allowed him to suck or bite his thumb to receive bursts of stupendous wisdom. He took his place as the leader of his band, and numerous tales are told of their adventures. Now, some things have only survived in modern text, Irish text, during the 17th century at the oldest, although still started to contain elements in the 10th century. Um, Now, the world of the Fianna cycle is one in which professional warriors spend their time hunting, fighting, and engaging in adventures in the spirit world. And new entrants into the band are expected to be knowledgeable in poetry as well as undergo a number of physical tests or ordeals. Most of the poems are attributed to being composed by Oisin. This cycle creates a bridge between pre-Christian and Christian times. So when it comes to the king cycle, it was part of the duty of the medieval Irish bards or court poets to record the history of the family and the genealogy of the king that they served under. This they did in poems that blended the mythological and the historical to a greater or lesser degree, and the resulting stories from what has come to be known as the Cycle of the Kings are more correctly cycles, as there are a number of independent groupings, and this term is a more recent addition to the cycles, with it being coined in 1946 by Irish literary critic Miles Dillon. Yeah, so now the kings are included, range from the almost entirely mythological Labraid Longstaff, who allegedly became High King of Ireland around 431, to the entirely historical Brian Burrow. However, the greatest glory of the King's cycle is the Frenzy of Sweeney, which is a 12th century tale told in verse and prose. The king of Del Naradi was cursed by Saint Ronan and became a kind of half man, half bird, condemned to live out his life in the woods. Yeah, I kind of live it. I kind of live by the woods anyway. I don't live in the woods, but I live by it. Um, Now the adventures are extray, are a group of stories of visits to the Irish otherworld, which may be westward across the sea underground or simply invisible to mortals. The most famous, Oisin and Tyr, belongs to the Fenian cycle, but several freestanding adventures survive, including the adventure of Conley, the voyage of Bran Mac Furbail, and the adventure of Logair. And supposedly here, this is referred to as the Mound of Hostages in Ireland. This is supposedly, it's located in County Meath, which is in Ireland, and it's supposed to be lead you, if you go through it, it's supposed to get you into the underworld and somehow back out. Now the voyages are in Rama are tales of sea journeys and the wonders seen on them, that they may have resulted from the combination of the experiences of fishermen combined and the otherworld elements that inform the adventures of the seven Rama mentioned in the manuscripts. Only three have survived: the voyage of Mael Duin, the voyage of the Eucora, and the voyage of Snedgis and Mac Riagla. Now, the voyage of Malduin is the forerunner of the later voyage of St. Brendan. While not as ancient, later 8th century AD works that influenced European literature include the vision of Adamnan. Even though there are no written sources for the Irish mythology, many stories are passed down orally throughout traditional storytelling. Some of these stories have been lost, but some Celtic regions continue to tell the folk tales to the modern day. Now, folk tales and stories were primarily preserved by monastic scribes from the bards of nobility. Once the noble houses started to decline, this tradition was put to an end, and the bards passed the stories to their families, and the families would take on the oral tradition of storytelling through to their children and everything like that. Now, now during the first few years of the 20th century, Hermione Templeton Cavanaugh wrote down many Irish folk tales, which she would publish in magazines and also publish two books about. 26 years after her death, the tales from her two books, Darby O'Gill and the Good People and Ashes of Old Bushes, were made into the film Darby O'Gill and the Little People. And noted Irish playwright Lady Gregory also collected folk stories to preserve Irish history. The Irish Folklore Commission gathered folk tales from the general Irish populace from 1935 until now. Um, Now that is the end. That is the end of the story for my video here. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll be back next week with a video on the country England, and we're going to go into England next week. So make sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more videos like this. Leave your comment. Let me know what you guys thought about the video, and don't forget to tune in next week, and hopefully you guys won't miss it. These videos are getting better and better with time, and I'll see you guys next week, because next week I got my work, and I'm trying to work around that, but I hope you guys enjoyed, so thank you.